I was standing on the rooftop of our trainee dormitory building, 15 stories up, looking down at the street below. It was 3 in the morning. I had not slept in 4 days. I had not eaten a real meal in over a week. My body was shaking from exhaustion and malnutrition, and something deeper, something like despair that had seeped into my bones. I had just been told that after 6 years of training, after sacrificing my entire adolescence, my health, my sanity, I was being dropped from the company. In that moment, standing on that ledge with the cold soul wind cutting through my thin clothes, I heard a voice, not from behind me, not from anywhere I could identify. It spoke directly into my spirit and it said, "This is not how your story ends." And what happened in the hours and days after that moment completely shattered everything I thought I knew about success, about identity, and about the God I had been taught did not exist. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small city about an hour outside of Seoul, in a typical Korean household. My parents were hardworking people who ran a small restaurant specializing in traditional Korean food. They worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, just to keep food on the table and pay for my education and my brother's education. In Korean culture, success is everything. Your worth as a person, your value to your family, your standing in society. It is all measured by your achievements, what university you attend, what company you work for, how much money you make, what kind of car you drive. And from a very young age, I absorbed this mentality completely. It was in the air I breathed. It was in every conversation. It was in the way my parents looked at my report cards. But I was not academically gifted like my older brother. He was brilliant, top of his class, destined for a prestigious university and a successful career. School was a constant struggle for me. I would study for hours and still fail tests. I could never keep up with the other students, no matter how hard I tried. My parents would look at my test scores, and I could see the disappointment in their eyes, even when they tried to hide it behind encouraging words. I felt like a failure before I even turned 10 years old, like I would never amount to anything, like I was bringing shame to my family just by existing, just by not being smart enough, just by not being like my brother.
The only thing I was good at was dancing. When I danced, something came alive inside me. Something that was dead in every other area of my life suddenly had breath. I could express emotions I could never put into words. I could be someone else for a few minutes. Someone powerful. Someone graceful. Someone worthy of attention. I would watch K-pop music videos for hours, memorizing every single move, practicing in my tiny bedroom until my legs gave out and I collapsed on the floor. My walls were covered with posters of my favorite groups. They were my gods. My idols in the truest sense of the word. When I was about 12 years old, I saw an advertisement for open auditions at one of the biggest entertainment companies in Korea. A company that had produced some of the most famous groups in the world. Groups I had worshipped since I was a little girl. I begged my parents to let me try out. They were hesitant at first. The entertainment industry had a reputation in Korea. People whispered about what happened to young trainees. About the dark side that nobody talked about publicly. But they also saw how passionate I was. How dancing was the only thing that made me come alive. The only thing I was actually good at. So after weeks of pleading, they agreed to let me audition.
I will never forget that audition day. There were thousands of kids there, literally thousands. Boys and girls from all over Korea, some from other countries, all of them desperate for the same dream, the same chance to become somebody. I waited in line for over 8 hours in a crowded hallway that smelled like sweat and anxiety. When my turn finally came, I was so nervous I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking, my mouth was dry, but the moment the music started, something took over. I danced like my life depended on it, because in my mind, it did. This was my only chance to be somebody, my only chance to make my parents proud, my only chance to prove that I was not just the stupid daughter who could not pass her exams. 2 weeks later, I got the call that changed everything. I had been selected as a trainee. Out of thousands of hopefuls, I was one of the chosen few. I remember my mother crying tears of joy. My father actually smiled at me, which he almost never did. For the first time in my entire life, I felt like I had value, like I mattered, like I was worthy of love and attention. I was 13 years old, naive and hopeful, and desperate for approval. And I had absolutely no idea what I was walking into. The training system in K-pop is something most people outside of Korea cannot fully understand. It is not like going to dance school or taking music lessons on weekends. It is a complete and total surrender of your entire life, your autonomy, your identity. You sign a contract that essentially makes you property of the company for years. They control everything: what you eat, when you sleep, who you talk to, what you wear, how you look, what you post on social media, who you date, which is usually no one because dating is forbidden. Every single aspect of your existence becomes subject to their approval and their control. I moved into the company dormitory with 11 other female trainees. We shared tiny rooms with bunk beds crammed together so close you could reach out and touch the person next to you. No privacy, no personal space, no alone time, and the schedule was brutal beyond anything I could have imagined. We would wake up at 5 in the morning for vocal training before the sun came up. Then dance practice from 7 until noon without breaks. Then individual lessons in singing, rapping, language, media training in the afternoon. Then group practice from evening until midnight or later. Sometimes we would train for 18 or 20 hours straight with barely any rest, collapsing into our beds for a few hours before starting all over again. And the criticism was constant, relentless, unending. Every single day, trainers and managers and executives would scrutinize every aspect of our appearance and performance. You are too fat. You need to lose 5 more kilograms. You are too ugly. Your nose is too big. Your eyes are too small. You need double eyelid surgery. Your skin is too dark. Use more whitening products. Your voice is weak and unstable. Your dancing is sloppy and unfocused. You have no stage presence. You will never debut looking like that. Every single day, we were told everything that was wrong with us, everything that needed to be fixed, everything that made us unworthy of success. I stopped eating, not because anyone explicitly ordered me to stop, but because the message was clear in everything they said and did. Thin was beautiful. Thin was successful. Thin was worthy of love and fame. The thinner you were, the more praise you received. The more you ate, the more shame you felt. I would go days eating nothing but a few crackers and black coffee and water. Sometimes not even that. I would weigh myself 10 times a day, obsessively stepping on that scale every few hours. If the number went up even half a kilogram, I would panic. I would exercise in secret at night when everyone else was sleeping. I would make myself throw up after the rare times I ate a full meal. I developed severe anorexia and bulimia. Though I did not call it that at the time, I just called it dedication. I called it doing what was necessary. I called it the price of success. The psychological manipulation was even worse than the physical demands. The company used a ranking system to keep us competitive and desperate. Every single month, we would be evaluated by a panel of judges and ranked against each other from best to worst. The trainees at the bottom of the rankings would be cut, sent home in disgrace, failures. So we were not just competing against the millions of other people who wanted to be idols. We were competing against each other. The girls I lived with, ate with, trained with, cried with, they were also my rivals. My enemies in a twisted game of survival. Trust was impossible. Friendship was dangerous. Everyone was looking for weakness to exploit. for information to use against you, for ways to make themselves look better by making you look worse. I watched trainee after trainee get cut. Some of them had been there for years, had given everything they had, their youth, their health, their sanity, and then one day they would just be gone, their bed empty, their belongings removed. No goodbye, no explanation, just erased like they had never existed, and we were expected to keep training as if nothing had happened, as if losing someone we had lived with for years meant nothing. Show emotion, and you were weak. Cry, and you were pathetic. Keep your head down and keep working, or you would be next. By my 3rd year of training, I had changed completely as a person. I was not the bright-eyed 13-year-old who loved to dance anymore. That girl was dead, buried somewhere under years of criticism and starvation and sleep deprivation. I was hollow, empty, a machine designed to perform on command, and nothing more. I had lost my period from malnutrition. My hair was falling out in clumps. I could not sleep without pills, even though I was exhausted constantly. My skin was gray, my eyes were dead, and I had started cutting myself. Not to end my life, just to feel something, just to have some form of release from the pressure that was crushing me from every direction. The physical pain of the blade was easier to handle than the emotional pain that never stopped. The spiritual darkness in that environment was something I did not fully recognize until years later. But looking back with clarity, I can see it now. There were rituals, practices, things we were encouraged to do for success. Senior idols and trainees who had been there longer would tell us about visiting fortune tellers and shamans, about making offerings at certain shrines, about spiritual practices and ceremonies that would help our careers, about calling on certain spirits for favor. I did not think much of it at the time. Religion was not something my family practiced with any seriousness. We were culturally Buddhist, but not devout. We would visit temples on holidays, but it was tradition more than faith. So when people talked about appeasing spirits or seeking supernatural favor or performing rituals for success, it seemed normal, just part of the industry, just what everyone did. I remember one night very clearly. A group of senior trainees took some of us younger ones to meet with a famous spiritual advisor, a shaman who supposedly had powerful connections to the spirit world, someone who could tell us our futures and help us achieve our dreams. I sat in front of this woman in a dark room filled with incense smoke and candles and strange symbols I did not recognize. She looked at me with these eyes that seemed to see right through me, and she told me things about my life that she could not have possibly known through any natural means. Personal things, secret things, things I had never told anyone. And then she said I had a great destiny in this industry, that I would achieve fame beyond my imagination. But there was a price. There was always a price for those who wanted to rise to the top. I did not fully understand what she meant then. But I would learn. The spiritual oppression that began to weigh on me after that night was subtle at first. Nightmares that felt more real than waking life, voices whispering accusations in the dark hours of the morning, a heaviness in my chest that never lifted, a sense that something was watching me, following me, waiting for something. I thought it was just stress, just exhaustion, just my mind breaking under the pressure. I did not realize I had opened doors that were never meant to be opened. In my 5th year of training, I was finally selected to be part of a debut group. After all those years of suffering, all that starvation and abuse, I was going to make it. I was going to be an idol. I remember calling my parents from the company bathroom, crying happy tears, hearing them cry on the other end of the line. All the sacrifice had been worth it. All the pain had led to this moment. Or so I believed. The months leading up to debut were the most intense of my entire life. 18-hour days minimum, constant consultations about plastic surgery. They wanted to fix my nose, reshape my jaw, widen my eyes. I agreed to everything. I would have agreed to absolutely anything at that point. I had given too much already. What was a little more? What did it matter if they cut my face open if it meant I would finally debut? But 3 weeks before our scheduled debut date, everything collapsed. One of the members of our group was caught in a scandal, something from her past that the company had not discovered during her training years. The news spread online. The company panicked. The debut was cancelled. The group was dissolved. And just like that, 6 years of my life meant absolutely nothing. I was called into the CEO's office and told in a cold, businesslike tone that I was being released from my contract. They said I was too old now. 20 was ancient in an industry that worshipped youth. They said I was too damaged, too thin, too fragile, too expensive to rehabilitate, that the investment in me had not paid off. They thanked me for my years of service and told me to clean out my locker and leave the building by the end of the day. I walked out of that building in a complete daze. I had nothing, no education, because I had dropped out of school to train full-time. No job skills, because all I knew was dancing and singing and performing. No identity, because for 6 years, my entire sense of self had been wrapped up in becoming an idol. I was 20 years old, with nothing to show for my life except an eating disorder, severe depression, anxiety, emotional trauma, and scars covering my arms. I had no future, no hope, no reason to continue existing. That night was the night I ended up on that rooftop. I had taken a taxi back to the dormitory to collect my things, and instead of going to my room, I went up. I took the elevator to the top floor, and then the stairs to the roof access door. I was not thinking clearly. I had not slept in days, had not eaten. My mind was a thick fog of despair. And standing on that ledge, looking down at the street 15 stories below, it seemed like the only logical conclusion to my story. I had failed. I was worthless. I had brought shame to my family. There was no point in continuing a life that had no purpose. That is when I heard the voice, clear as crystal, cutting through the fog in my brain. This is not how your story ends. I spun around expecting to see someone behind me, but the rooftop was completely empty. Just me and the wind and the lights of Seoul, stretching out in every direction like a galaxy of earthbound stars. But I had heard it, clear as anything I had ever heard in my life, and something in those words cut through the despair, made me step back from the edge, made me sit down on the cold concrete and weep until I had no tears left. I do not know how long I sat there, hours maybe, but at some point the sun started to come up, and with it came a thought I could not explain. A gentle prompting, go to the church on the corner. I had passed that church hundreds of times over the years, a small Christian church tucked between apartment buildings. I had never given it a second thought. Christianity was a foreign religion, something for Westerners, not for Koreans like me, but the thought would not leave me alone. So I walked down from that rooftop, out of the building, down the empty morning street to that little church with its simple wooden cross above the door. The doors were locked. It was barely 6 in the morning. But I sat down on the stone steps and waited. I did not know what else to do. I did not know where else to go. About an hour later, an elderly woman came walking down the street with keys in her hand. She was small and gray-haired and moved slowly. She took one look at me sitting there on the steps, at my tear-stained face and my skeletal frame and my dead, hollow eyes. And without saying a single word, she walked up those steps and wrapped her arms around me, a complete stranger holding me like I was her own daughter, like I was the most precious thing in the world, and I broke down completely in her embrace. She brought me inside the church and made me hot tea. She did not ask questions, did not preach at me, did not judge my appearance or demand explanations. Just sat with me in that quiet sanctuary with its wooden pews and simple altar while I cried out years of accumulated pain. And when I finally calmed down enough to speak, I told her everything: the training, the abuse, the starvation, the cutting, the spiritual rituals, the rooftop. All of it came pouring out like water from a broken dam. She listened to every single word without interrupting, and when I was finally finished, when I had emptied myself of everything, she said something that changed the entire trajectory of my life. She said, "There is someone who loves you exactly as you are right now. Not for what you can achieve, not for how thin you can become, not for how perfectly you can dance. He loves you because you are His daughter, because He created you, because He chose you before you were ever born, ever. And His name is Jesus. Something cracked open inside me when she said those words. She opened her worn Bible and began to read to me verses about God knowing us before we were formed in our mother's wombs, about Him having good plans for us, about being fearfully and wonderfully made. Words that were the exact opposite of everything I had been told for 6 years. You are not too fat. You are beautiful. You are not too ugly. You are wonderfully made. You are not worthless. You are precious beyond measure. You are loved, truly loved, not for what you do, but for who you are. That morning, on my knees on the hard wooden floor of that little church, I asked Jesus to come into my life. I did not have fancy religious words. I did not know any prayers. I just said, if you are real, I need you. I cannot do this alone anymore. Please help me. Please save me. What happened next is difficult to put into adequate words. I felt warmth flood through my entire body, starting in my chest and spreading outward until even my frozen fingers were tingling with life. And with the warmth came peace, a supernatural peace that made absolutely no logical sense given my circumstances. I was still homeless, still jobless, still broken, but somehow none of that mattered anymore. Something fundamental had shifted in my soul. The healing journey since that morning has been long and difficult. I had years of trauma to work through, years of lies I had believed about myself that needed to be replaced with truth. I had to learn how to eat again without shame, how to look in a mirror without disgust, how to believe that I had value even if I never achieved anything the world considered successful. Mrs. Kim, that elderly woman who found me on the church steps, became like a grandmother to me. She let me stay with her, fed me, taught me how to pray, showed me what unconditional love actually looked like. I also had to renounce all the spiritual practices I had participated in, every ritual, every offering, every visit to shamans and fortune tellers. Mrs. Kim helped me understand that I had opened doors to darkness that needed to be firmly closed and locked. We prayed through each one specifically, and with each prayer, I felt lighter, freer, like chains I did not even know I was wearing were falling away. About a year after that morning in the church, I finally gathered the courage to go home and see my parents. I had been avoiding them for months, terrified of their disappointment, but Mrs. Kim encouraged me to go, to trust God with the outcome. When my mother opened the door and saw me, she burst into tears. Not tears of disappointment, tears of relief. She grabbed me and held me tight and kept saying she thought she had lost me. She told me she had been having dreams, terrible dreams of me standing on a rooftop, dreams of me falling into darkness, and she had been praying desperately to any God who would listen to save her daughter. I told her about Jesus that day, about the voice on the rooftop, about Mrs. Kim and the little church, about the peace that now lived in my heart. My mother listened with tears streaming down her face, and when I finished, she said she wanted to know this Jesus too. That afternoon, in my parents' small apartment, I had the privilege of leading my own mother in a prayer of salvation. My father took longer. He was skeptical at first, but over time, as he watched the transformation in his wife and daughter, his walls came down. Today, both of my parents are believers. They attend church every Sunday. And my father, who never smiled when I was growing up, now has a joy in his eyes that was never there before. Today, I run a small ministry helping former trainees and idols who are struggling with the same darkness I experienced. There are so many of us, so many broken people hiding behind manufactured smiles. The industry creates an illusion of glamour, but behind the scenes there is so much pain, so many young people starving themselves and hurting themselves and questioning whether life is worth living. And one by one, I am introducing them to Jesus. I want to speak directly to anyone caught in that world right now. Maybe you are a trainee who has not eaten in days. Maybe you are an idol who smiles for the cameras but cries alone at night. Maybe you walked away from the industry broken and empty like I was. wondering if there is any point in going on. There is hope, real hope, not in fame, not in debut, not in applause, but in the one who sees you on that rooftop in the darkest moment of your life. The one who speaks into the void and says, "This is not how your story ends. If you are watching this and you are in that dark place, please hear me. Do not give up. Do not step off that ledge. There is a God who loves you desperately, who has plans for your life better than any fame you could achieve. He is not looking for perfect performances. He is looking for you, just as you are. Cry out to him. He is listening. He will meet you where you are. This is not how your story ends. The best chapters are still being written.